Hi, everyone. Thank you so much to all of the pitches. This was amazing. Actually, I was on the edge of my seat watching each one. And I'm really excited now for this next talk. We have Kirsten Campbell-Howes here from Busuu, where she runs the team of learning designers who create Busuu's courses and the teacher operations team that looks after the faculty of over 10,000 language teachers worldwide. In this talk, Kirsten will take a look back over the past 20 years as digital language learning has really grown up, and we'll ask how far have we come, focusing on 5 significant ways in which the online language learning experience has improved things for learners, and then we'll zoom in on the present and ask where we go from here. So I'm very excited, Kirsten, and I will leave you to it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for your patience. All right, so thank you for the great intro, Megan, and thank you, Chatterbug, for organising this conference. I've really been glued to my seat this morning, and it's such a great thing to have an opportunity for us all to get together and share, which I'll touch on a little bit as I do a kind of survey of the last 20 years in digital language learning, looking at how things have really improved for language learners, but also looking at ways that we still need to improve things for language learners. And I know that there are a lot of people learning languages watching this talk, and I'd really like to hear from you guys as well in the chat as I'm talking. If you could have a think about what ways has digital made language learning easier for you, and in particular, in what ways is digital not serving your needs as a language learner? What are digital tools or strategies or methodologies that you're really missing and you would like to see? I'd love to hear from you in the chat if that's possible. Okay, so a little bit about Busuu. So our purpose is to inspire the world to learn together. So community is really at the heart of what we do. So we have a suite of self-study courses because it's great for you to spend time learning on your own. But we are also firmly convinced that you will never get to fluency if you don't have the opportunity to practice with others. And so we provide online teachers one-to-one and also soon to offer group language learning lessons online. And the community part of Busuu, which is really the heart of what we offer. We have 115 million learners with over 30,000 joining each day, which is like an entire football pitch of people, which is kind of crazy. And these are the countries where we are most popular. So we connect language learners who are learning each other's language. So if you're Spanish and you're learning Turkish, we'll connect you with a Turkish speaker. And you can write and speak and make friends and practice the language together. A little bit about me. While I was preparing for this talk, I realized that it's been exactly 20 years that I've been working in language learning. So 20 years ago this week, I moved to Shanghai in China to teach English. And here I am with one of my very first classes. As you can see, we didn't have any heating in my school. It was very cold. Fast forward a year, I didn't stay in teaching too long because I moved into creating online language learning courses almost immediately. And again, while I was researching for this talk, I found an old screenshot of the very first web-based online learning course that I helped to create back in the day. And then on the right, you can see some screenshots of Buzu's Spanish course. And right there is one of the major differences that I've seen in the last 20 years, a big move from web to mobile. Now, people are obviously still learning on web. It's still a very important platform. But for Busuu, at least, the majority of our learners are actually accessing our courses and our community features via our iOS or Android apps. Okay, so thinking back over the last 20 years, what are 5 ways that digital has made language learning better for learners? And again, I'd love to hear from all of you in the chat if there are other things that you'd like to share. So the first one I thought about was choice. Back when I was creating online content in 2002, we really didn't have very many competitors. We didn't talk about competitors because there just weren't many offerings out there. And as a language learner, your options were really a couple of places you could learn English online, or you had to learn in a traditional school or via a textbook or CD-ROMs or audio cassettes. Fast forward to 2021. Apologies to people that I've missed out here, but this is just a small selection of the online and digital offerings that you as a language learner have access to. And this choice is amazing. It gives people so many different ways to learn, different ways to connect with each other. And you can still go to bricks and mortar classes, you can still use textbooks, but you have all of these other options available to you, which is fantastic. I talked a little bit about community and how central that is to Busuu. And here you can see some kind of screenshots of how we enable learners to connect with each other. We provide writing and speaking prompts. We pair you up with other people in the community who are speakers of the language you're learning. And we allow you to correct each other and to exchange and to start conversations. This was just not possible when I first got started in digital language learning. Really, it took the invention of the social network in order for this to happen. But now, you know, you can learn almost any language and find a speaker of that language with quite a lot of ease using digital language learning tools. I've been learning Spanish for quite a long time, and in my quest to learn Spanish, I think I've had over 50 different Spanish teachers, and I just selected 4 of them. But over the years, I mean, I've had a teacher in Madrid who was an obsessive gamer and who loved Russian culture. I've had a teacher in Venezuela who was learning to be an architect and was really passionate about architecture. I had a teacher in Paris who was a gourmand who loved French cuisine. I had a teacher in Colombia who was a former professional football player, but had quit the football world to come back to his home country and teach Spanish. And having this diversity of teachers has really enriched my Spanish learning. I not only have access to different accents, but just different cultures and different perceptions about Spanish and Spanish culture and Spanish speaking culture. And I think this would just not have been possible 20 years ago. You'd probably have signed up for a class in a school and had 1 or 2 teachers. Very little diversity in terms of opinion and age and experience. And this is a huge advantage for language learners, I think. Affordability is a really big one. Back in 2007, I was living in London and I was learning Norwegian, and there just weren't that many options available to me if I wanted a Norwegian teacher. I looked and I searched and I found one guy, Tarje, who lived quite far from where I lived in London. So I had to travel 1 hour to get to his flat to have a face-to-face lesson, and then 1 hour back. He charged £25 an hour, which was quite out of my budget. And if I'd taken enough lessons to get me to sort of B2 level in Norwegian, it would have cost me £10,000. And it would have taken 800 additional hours of travel time. As you can probably guess, I didn't stick around for very long, and I kind of gave up learning Norwegian. But I still wanted to learn Norwegian, and back in 2014, I started again. And this time there were all these great tools like italki out there. And so I found a new Norwegian teacher, Jana, who's actually Serbian, lives in Belgrade. She was charging €14 per hour. And I stayed with her for 2 years and we became quite good friends. My Norwegian got up to quite a good level. It was affordable for me and I didn't have to travel at all. So I spent a lot less time on it. And affordability is absolutely crucial for language learners, and it can be really the difference between whether you're able to learn a language or not. Last point, last reflection on how things have really improved. On the left, you can see a book that I wrote for HarperCollins back in 2013. It took about 2 years to develop this book from kind of concept to publishing, which is a long time. It's still around, this book, many years later, and it'll probably be around for about 15 years. Great for me, arguably not so great for language learners, because a lot of the methodologies and ideas in that book are a bit out of date now. For example, I was writing about how to write for Twitter and Facebook, and that stuff is out of date now. Contrast with a tool like Busuu, we have a development cycle that can work in weeks or months. So we can get new lesson content out there very quickly for learners. And in our most popular courses, that content will only stick around for 2 or 3 years max. We're constantly refreshing it, constantly refining it, constantly trying to make it better in response to what we hear from learners. And that's really important. And it's just not something you can do with non-digital materials. The last year has been a major turning point for the whole world, but digital language learning is definitely part of that. And you can see online education has grown massively in terms of downloads in the last year. Total edtech spend is predicted to grow massively to over $1 trillion in the next few years, accelerated by COVID. And digital language learning as a market will grow tremendously as well. I mean, it was growing hugely anyway, but COVID has really, really accelerated that. So the floodgates are open. It's an historic moment for language learning, but digital and online language learning providers, we can't be complacent. We still have a lot to do to make language learning truly effective for language learners. So here are some of the key challenges that I think we still need to solve. And as I said earlier, I'd love to hear from you guys as well in the chat if there are things that you think need to be done better. Number one, helping learners understand how long it takes to learn a language. So Scott from Chatterbug gave a great talk last year about how we tend to think of ourselves as not good at learning languages, but actually probably what we're doing is just not putting in enough hours. I've been learning Spanish for 4 years, but I haven't really been learning Spanish for 4 years. I counted it up and I've been learning Spanish for 150 hours. Feels like a long time to me, but in terms of actual hours that I've put in, not so many perhaps. So one of the ways that we at Buzu are helping learners with this challenge is through a feature that we call Study Plan. So when a learner joins us, we say to them, what level do you want to get to? And how much time are you prepared to spend each week to get to that level? And then we do a little bit of work in the background and we generate a study plan for them, which gives them a date by which they'll reach their goal. And then it breaks that down into weekly and daily goals. And so helps to kind of maintain motivation over time, but also help learners understand how much work they need to put in. But this is just one tool, and there are many more ways that we could be more transparent and more helpful to learners to help them manage these quite long and involved journeys to fluency. Number two, helping learners understand how to learn, meta learning. These are just some of the questions that I get asked over and over again by language learners, and they're questions I have myself. Am I spending enough time learning? Have I learned the right vocabulary for the level that I'm at? Should I be watching movies in Spanish, or is that a waste of my time? As language learning professionals, we know the answers to these questions, but we often don't share them. We concentrate on building great products and great courses, but not on really helping learners on that journey of understanding how to learn. Connected to that point, one of the ways that we can really do this is by harnessing our data. we're digital, right? We have millions of learners in our platforms sometimes, and that means billions of data points about how long it takes learners to get to certain levels, what days of the week they learn best, whether sometimes they're doing too much, sometimes they're doing too little. This is probably a little hard to read, this chart, but this comes from a recent efficacy study that Buzu did, which has just been published online. We didn't set out to find this. This was some incidental data that came out of the main research data, but we saw that the learners who were improving the most on their speaking tests were those who had a specific balance between time spent doing self-study and time spent learning with a teacher. We found that it was between 30 to 50% live lesson time for optimal performance on a speaking test. This is super useful data, and this will help us to design a better product and make better recommendations for learners. But collectively, the digital language learning industry needs to get better at sharing our data and using it to design better experiences for our learners. Refining face-to-face methodologies. So at Buzu, we take a lot of our inspiration from communicative methodologies used in the classroom. But what works in a face-to-face environment doesn't always translate into a digital environment, and it needs to be refined or changed. An example here is that a common communicative methodology is to give free practice in speaking in a class. So you might do that with a role play, for example, but role plays don't work terribly well online, especially in an asynchronous environment. So what we've tried to do at Buzu is to still give that practice in speaking, but to do it through our community features. So we give people prompts and we ask them to write or record themselves in response to those prompts and then get feedback from the community. And here, I pulled these examples yesterday. You can see a lower level learner is talking about something quite profound, right? She's talking about her fear of death. And then on the right, we have a more advanced learner who's reflecting in quite some detail about how the pandemic has changed his neighborhood. Again, really profound, really interesting, thoughtful insights that work really, really well in a digital environment and which help to develop people's fluency and confidence. This is a digital methodology, and I think one of the great things about conferences like this is the chance to share what methodologies work in digital and how we've adapted face-to-face methodologies. Final point, taking digital language learning and ourselves seriously. So I referred to the efficacy study that we've just done. We saw that the cohort that was taking speaking tests, half of them improved by at least half of one CEFR level with an average study time of just 20 hours and less in some cases. Now, this wasn't the main focus of our research. This was another bit of incidental data. And we didn't set out to learn how long it takes to master a level, but we're starting to see data that's suggesting that digital can seriously accelerate how quickly a language learner masters content. But I still hear all the time from academics, especially, that classroom language learning has to be better than digital, and dismissing apps. And I think it's really important that we continue to have conferences like this to do efficacy research. I encourage you all, if you haven't, to do efficacy research and share that, to give language learners confidence that digital is the right and the best solution. Okay, I'm nearly at an end of my presentation, and just to kind of circle back, so 20 years in language learning, and I think these images sort of showcase a little bit about how things have changed. There I am in the classroom, close to people. Here's me talking to my team online at the moment. I do hope that we can return to face-to-face collaboration at some point in the future. But I also think digital is here to stay. I'm very happy working in digital language learning, and that's it. Thanks to the organisers again. And I think I've got a bit of time left for Q&A if there are any questions.
Hello, I'm back. Thank you so much for that talk. That was wonderful. And we do have some questions that came in during the talk. One of which was, why do so many teachers have trouble migrating from offline formats to online? Which has especially been the case over the past year, I'm sure.
I think it can be quite scary. I mean, as you've seen from this presentation, it's a common thing to struggle with tech, right? It behaves in unpredictable ways.
Tell me about it.
And I have taught teachers how to use digital platforms, and I once saw a teacher pick up a mouse and wave it in the air in front of a monitor because he'd never used a mouse before. It can be super scary and challenging, and I don't blame teachers who've spent years perfecting their techniques and methodologies in the classroom from being frightened of digital. But I have also seen, after a bit of time and training and taking a deep breath, teachers just going, wow, this is amazing, and the possibilities for me are so huge here, and making that transition. So I think it's a case of facing your fears.
Yeah, I agree. I've seen the same with like my mother, who teaches at community colleges, and like migrating to Zoom classes, I think she was quite like, oh, I can't actually interact with my full body, and I can't see all of your reactions that quickly. So I can understand the fear that goes with it. Tying into that question was, from a learner's perspective, could you give us an example of how you help users understand how to learn at Busuu? I think we have quite a way to go with this, to be honest. And we're talking about, for example, having a meta learning kind of course, because we do try, the learning designers in my team try to, in a light touch way, help people understand what's coming up next, what they've already learned, what the learning outcomes are, so that they have this sense of progress. We also try and design our dashboard in a certain way, for example, so learners can see the size of the course and therefore understand how long it takes. We're also adapting certain methodologies around, for example, comprehensible input, but we're finding that learners don't like reading too much text, for example. So there's a challenge between balancing what we know is good practice for learning how to learn and what learners actually want. So we spend quite a lot of time trying to tease these things apart. But I think it's about just providing that information in a easily digestible way. Another thing we've done is send out sort of emails periodically to learners at different points in their journey, and sort of say, now is the time to start reviewing content, for example. So these are some of the ways that we've explored doing it. Okay, thank you. I think there's a few questions that have come in. Let's have a look. What's kind of relevant? As a Busuu user, what do you suggest for learners of multiple languages on your app or even on other platforms?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I've tried learning multiple languages at the same time, and I have to admit, I struggle with it. I was learning Japanese and Spanish for a while, and I think for me, cognitively, I think it's fine, and in fact, I think sometimes they can help each other out. It's managing the time, right? And I found that I just didn't have enough time to do both properly. And so I've decided to pause on the Japanese now and really focus on the Spanish. But I think if provided you've got enough time and enough motivation, it can be quite good to have separate tools and strategies and maybe separate spaces for learning different languages. So I would learn Japanese in a different room in my house than I would learn Spanish, for example. And I created this kind of firewall separation in my brain between those two languages, and that seemed to work for me. but good luck to you for learning multiple languages at the same time.
Both a mental wall and a physical wall. Just completely separate the two. Oh, that's a good idea. I like that. Another question that came in, just a bit more general. So do you have any resources for doing research on refining face-to-face learning methodologies?
We're starting internally to generate them. What I'd really like to do is continue some of the conversations that are happening in this conference. I think maybe we could have like a kind of working group of digital language learning apps where we start to collate and share some of these resources together. I've also been talking to someone in EdTech more generally about creating a kind of learning design playbook. There's not that many great learning design resources out there, but I think the onus is on us to start creating this stuff and sharing it. So if anyone wants to talk to me about this after the conference, it's kirsten@busuu.com, and I'd love to hear people's ideas on this.
Yeah, I think we're running out of time, but it would be great if you can pop into the chat and leave your Twitter handle or how people can reach you, because then I think this conversation can go on.
Yeah.
And I also saw throughout the talk that the chat was on fire.
Okay, I'll go. I wasn't able to look at it, so I will go in and have a look.
No, but there was some good discussions going on. Also in connection with with some of the pitches that came before this talk.
Yeah.
So it's really exciting to see like the intersection of these two. Okay, so yeah, we're on time now, and I want to thank you again. Everyone else, please hang tight for the next presentation. Megan will pop in soon. And yeah, thank you very much. Wonderful.
Thanks for the opportunity.